The courtroom buzzed with restrained energy, attorneys shuffling papers, quiet murmurs drifting through rows of benches, and the faint echo of a gavel striking in some distant courtroom. Judge Miranda Carlisle adjusted her posture on the elevated bench, her demeanor calm and composed. Another docket, another day, another case. That was the assumption, until the bailiff's voice sliced through the air. Case number 519, the State of Oregon versus Lucas Vance. Miranda's eyes flicked to the paperwork before her. Charges: aggravated assault, armed robbery, resisting arrest. She felt that familiar weight press on her chest. Another broken life swallowed by the system. Then the door at the side opened and the defendant stepped into view. The world tilted. The man being led in, shackled at the wrists and ankles, wasn't a stranger. It was Lucas. Her Lucas. Her fingers tensed against the edge of the mahogany bench as a dam of memories burst open. Windy autumn afternoons spent skateboarding down the hills of Forest Grove. Midnight conversations on the rooftop of his mother's grocery store. The pact they made when they were 15, fingers crossed beneath the stars. No matter where life takes us, we don't forget each other. But the boy she'd made that promise to was gone. The man now in front of her wore time like a burden. Shoulders heavy, jaw hard, eyes dulled by struggle. Yet they were unmistakably his eyes. Those same hazel flecks, guarded and searching. Miranda's grip on her gavel faltered. In 15 years on the bench, she'd never lost her footing. But now the courtroom shrank around her, the air growing too thin, the noise too far away. Lucas lifted his head. Recognition. Brief, then gone. His gaze fell to the floor, shoulders curling in like a defense mechanism. Miranda cleared her throat, steadying her voice. Mr. Vance, you stand accused of aggravated assault and robbery. How do you plead? His voice was a shadow of what she remembered, raspy and worn. Not guilty, Your Honor. Her heartbeat rattled in her chest. She wanted to freeze time, to call a recess, to pull him into her chambers and demand to know everything. What had happened, why they never found their way back, how things had splintered so far. But the robe on her shoulders demanded objectivity. Proceed, she said, her tone controlled, though her fingers twitched with tension.
The prosecutor launched into their opening statement, but Miranda heard none of it. Her mind drifted backward through layers of time, peeling away decades like leaves from a branch. She and Lucas had grown up in the same small Oregon town, though it had never felt like they came from the same world. Her family lived in a quaint craftsman home on Sycamore Street, while Lucas and his mother occupied a cramped apartment above the market they barely kept afloat. Social circles in Forest Grove didn't mix, and theirs wasn't a friendship that had permission to exist. They met at age 11, when Miranda wandered behind the store chasing a stray cat. Lucas was there, barefoot, trying to fix a broken scooter. She helped him find a bolt in the grass. He gave her a free candy bar. It was the start of something neither of them had language for, but they built it anyway, in stolen hours and hushed meetings, defying expectations with every laugh and late-night walk. "I ever tell you my dream?" Lucas asked her once, lying beside her on the rooftop as rain clouds gathered. "New York, not forever, just for a while. Somewhere people don't look at me like I'm not supposed to be here." She had smiled, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. The town never really gave them space. Whispers followed them like shadows. Teachers raised eyebrows. Her mother accidentally read her messages. Still, they stayed close. Until that day, 17 years old, when her stepfather came home early and found them watching a movie in her room. "Out, now!" he barked, his face twisted with fury. Lucas had stood without a word. "I'll see you," he whispered before leaving. But they didn't. Miranda was grounded for the summer. Lucas stopped answering messages. A month later, his family left town. Rumor had it his mom couldn't keep the store. And that was it. A slow, silent ending. Miranda dove into books and ambition. She made herself forget. Law school in Seattle, clerkship in Portland, eventual appointment to the bench. Her past, she believed, had been buried. Until now. As the prosecutor finished and the defense attorney rose, Miranda studied Lucas again. His eyes were tired, but he held his ground. There was something defiant in his posture, something she remembered. She wondered how many fights he'd had to endure, how many chances he never got. She couldn't change the past. She couldn't recuse herself now either, not without raising questions and drawing attention that could taint the trial. But she could be fair. More than that, she had to be just. The courtroom waited on her word. And for the first time that morning, she looked up, not as a judge looking at a defendant, but as Miranda seeing Lucas.
And she whispered to herself, "Don't lose him again." Miranda Carlisle had spent her life chasing dreams of justice and fairness. Law school in Seattle, a clerkship in Portland, a black robe and a bench that gave her the authority to shape lives with a single gavel strike. But no matter how far she went, she never forgot the boy who had taught her what courage really looked like. Now, seated in a packed courtroom in downtown Portland, Judge Miranda Carlisle stared out over the rim of her glasses, trying to focus on the proceedings. But her eyes kept drifting toward the man seated at the defense table, Lucas Vance, the boy from Forest Grove, the one she had once sworn she'd never forget and never forgive herself for leaving behind. It had been almost 20 years since she'd walked into her house and closed the door on their friendship for good. She'd done it under pressure, under fear, under the cold voice of her stepfather. But still, she had done it. And now here he was again, his name etched across the docket, his life reduced to charges, aggravated assault and robbery. His record showed earlier arrests, petty theft, loitering, a few run-ins with the law that never made headlines. Nothing screamed violence, nothing screamed danger. But then again, how much could anyone really learn from a few printed lines on a rap sheet? The prosecutor's voice dragged her back to the present. Lucas Vance is accused of assaulting a store clerk during a robbery at a convenience store in the St. John's neighborhood, said Richard Powell, sharp-jawed, rehearsed, and cold. The victim suffered minor injuries. The register was emptied. Mr. Vance was found several blocks away with the alleged cash in his possession. Miranda shifted slightly in her chair. She studied Lucas from the bench. Slouched posture, hands clasped, face unreadable. He wasn't looking at her. He hadn't, not once. Did he really do it? Or was there more to this story than the prosecutor was willing to admit? When the courtroom adjourned for lunch, Miranda escaped to her chambers, locking the door behind her like she was holding her past at bay. Her assistant, Margaret, knocked lightly before entering. "Judge Carlisle, everything okay? You seemed a little distant." Miranda hesitated. Could she tell her? Would it be unprofessional? Dangerous? "I'm fine," she said, shaking her head. "Just a lot on my mind." But she wasn't fine. How could she be, when the very ghost she'd buried beneath her ambition was sitting a few feet away, waiting to be judged? The trial resumed after lunch. The gallery had filled with spectators. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras were banned, but the courtroom buzzed with the hum of a public watching a train wreck in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Richard Powell began, voice smooth and cutting, "this case is about violence. About a man who walked into a store and attacked a defenseless clerk. The evidence will show that Lucas Vance is guilty beyond doubt." Miranda's stomach clenched. Powell spoke with icy detachment, as though Lucas were no more than a file folder. Lucas kept his eyes on the table. Then the defense rose. Lisa Porter, sharp as a blade, no more than 30, but already respected in the courtroom. Her voice rang with clarity. "The prosecution wants you to believe this is open and shut," she said, "but it's not. My client, Lucas Vance, has consistently maintained his innocence, and we will show that the assumptions made that night were based on fear, not fact." The first witness, the store clerk. He spoke with practiced clarity, describing a man in a red hoodie arguing with the cashier before lunging over the counter. But during cross-examination, Lisa struck fast. "You said the attacker wore a red hoodie," she confirmed. "Yes." "Did you see his face clearly?" "Not really. It was dark. The hood was up." "So, just to be clear, you couldn't definitively identify who it was?" He faltered. "No. No further questions." Miranda caught it. That tiny moment when Lucas sat up a little straighter. Just a fraction of hope settling into his bones. Next came the surveillance video. Grainy, dim, a blurry figure in a hoodie, darting inside, grabbing at the counter, disappearing. The prosecution insisted it was Lucas. Lisa objected to the clarity. Miranda watched the video carefully. Could that be him? She couldn't say. The final pillar of the defense, Lucas's alibi. He claimed he had been walking home from a friend's house, but the friend refused to testify, afraid, apparently, of community backlash. Lisa pleaded with the jury. A missing witness does not equal a lie. But Miranda saw the way the jurors exchanged glances. They were skeptical. As the afternoon light dimmed and the final motions were made, Miranda remained rooted in place. She wasn't just weighing evidence. She was weighing memory, weighing guilt, weighing how a boy who once talked about New York under a sky full of stars had ended up here, in shackles, under fluorescent lights. Lucas had taught her about courage when they were kids. Now, the question wasn't whether he had it. It was whether she did. Because tomorrow, Miranda Carlisle would have to decide whether to let the past define justice or to finally do what she hadn't been brave enough to do all those years ago, see him, and judge him fairly, no matter what it cost her. The weight of the moment pressed down on Judge Miranda Carlisle. She was trained to be impartial, a pillar of fairness, blind to emotion and history. But how could she be when every glance toward the defendant brought a rush of memories? The boy who used to toss pebbles at her window now sat before her in handcuffs, fighting for his freedom, and she was the one assigned to decide his fate. As the courtroom emptied for the day, Miranda lingered at the bench, her fingers tracing the carved edges of her gavel. She yearned to speak to him, to ask Lucas Vance, face to face, what had really happened that night. But she couldn't. Any contact outside the trial would violate every professional code she had sworn to uphold. And yet, as she watched him being led out by deputies, shackles clinking with every step, her resolve wavered. She had believed in the justice system all her life. She'd built her identity around it. But now, for the first time, Miranda wondered if the system could ever truly recognize the full truth, or if it merely reached for convenient pieces. The next day, tension hummed through the courtroom like static. The gallery was filled. Reporters scribbled into notebooks. Spectators leaned forward in their seats. The defense was ready to present its case. Lisa Porter, young but unshakable, called her first witness, Officer Daniel Harris, the man who had arrested Lucas. Miranda leaned forward slightly. If there were cracks in this case, this might be where they appeared. Officer Harris, burly and blunt, took the stand with the stiffness of someone convinced of his own certainty. "Officer Harris," Lisa began calmly, "you were the one who detained my client the night of the incident." "Yes," Harris replied, clipped and firm. "You reported that Mr. Vance was walking 2 blocks from the scene when you apprehended him." "That's correct." "What made you identify him as the suspect?" "He matched the description. Black male, mid-30s, dark clothing." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Dark clothing? But isn't it true the suspect in the surveillance video was described as wearing a red hoodie?" Harris shifted. Yes, but Mr. Vance may have discarded it before I arrived. Lisa stepped forward. Did you find a red hoodie during your search? No. Did you or any other officer search the surrounding area for it? No, we didn't have time. He was taken into custody quickly. So, just to clarify, you arrested my client based solely on a vague description and proximity to the scene, with no physical evidence connecting him to the crime? Harris's jaw clenched. We followed protocol. Lisa's voice chilled. Protocol doesn't replace proof. She turned to the judge. No further questions, Your Honor. The murmurs in the courtroom returned, soft and skeptical. Miranda glanced at the jury. A few exchanged uncertain looks. Something was shifting. Lisa wasn't finished. Her next witness was a forensic video analyst. The man reviewed the store's surveillance footage, pausing it on the grainy figure entering the shop. He explained that based on height, build, and posture, there was no way to definitively identify the person as Lucas. Worse, he noted that the timestamp on the footage had been altered, clearly edited, though the source of the tampering was unclear. The prosecution tried to dismiss the testimony as speculative, but Miranda could feel the tension rising. The jury was listening and doubting. By the time the analyst stepped down, the courtroom felt heavier. Shadows of uncertainty lingered in every corner. Then came the moment Miranda wasn't expecting. Lucas Vance stood up. He'd told Lisa he wanted to testify. She'd warned him of the risks, but he insisted. Chains clinked as he approached the witness stand, then settled into the chair. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then he spoke. "I've made mistakes," Lucas began, his voice quiet but clear, eyes locked on the jury. "I've taken wrong turns, trusted the wrong people, but I didn't do this." He paused, breath shaky. "That night, I was just walking home. I didn't steal anything. The cops didn't ask questions. They just saw me and decided I fit the part." Miranda's throat tightened. "I've been fighting my whole life," he continued, "fighting to be seen as more than what people assume when they look at me. But this, I'm tired. I'm just tired. I want the truth to matter." The courtroom was still. Miranda stared at him, no longer seeing the broken man in handcuffs, but the boy who once dreamed aloud beneath starlit Oregon skies. The boy who talked of leaving Forest Grove, who dared believe he could outrun the assumptions that always followed him. She looked to the jury. Their faces told the story. Empathy, hesitation, uncertainty. The prosecution had given them a version of events, but now they had another version, a real one, human, fractured, and powerful. This trial was no longer about evidence alone. It had become something deeper. Not just a verdict, a reckoning. Not just for Lucas, but for the system Miranda had spent her life defending. And tomorrow, that system would have to decide what justice truly meant. It was a battle of conscience, a quiet war between duty and memory. Judge Miranda Carlisle sat at the helm of the courtroom, cloaked not just in her robes, but in the weight of a system that too often mistook assumption for truth. Her role wasn't merely to uphold the law, it was to interpret it in service of something greater, true justice. The final day of the trial arrived, thick with tension. The closing arguments were deliberate, exacting. Richard Powell, the prosecutor, leaned heavily on circumstantial evidence, grainy footage, a rushed arrest, and Lucas's proximity to the scene. He urged the jury to trust the system. But Lisa Porter, calm and commanding, spoke of something deeper. She asked the jury to consider what wasn't said, to weigh not just the evidence, but the uncertainty. She painted Lucas not as a perfect man, but a man wrongfully assumed guilty because of how he looked and where he had been. She listened, her face unreadable. She wasn't allowed to sway the jury. couldn't lean in or tip her hand. But she would have the final word if their verdict left room for discretion. That power, though limited, rested solely with her, and it felt heavier than ever before. The jury deliberated for hours. The courtroom emptied and refilled in cycles as onlookers stretched, whispered, and speculated. Lucas sat motionless, his hands folded, eyes never lifting toward her bench. He hadn't looked at Miranda since the trial began, and she didn't blame him. What could she possibly say to undo the years or the silence? Then, at last, the bailiff stood. "Your Honor, the jury has reached a verdict." A hush fell over the room. The foreperson rose, voice unsteady, verdict in hand. In the case of the state of Oregon versus Lucas Vance, we find the defendant, the pause felt eternal, not guilty. The room stirred with gasps, a few scattered cheers, and hushed disbelief. Miranda tapped her gavel, order in the court. Lucas exhaled, a long and slow collapse of breath. His shoulders fell, a man unshackled, but far from healed. Miranda addressed the room. "The jury has spoken. Mr. Vance, you are free to go. This court is adjourned." As people filtered out, Miranda stayed seated. Her gaze followed Lucas as he signed release paperwork at the side of the room. For a moment, she thought he'd leave, without a glance, without a word. But then he turned. He approached the bench slowly, quietly, his expression measured. A few clerks still packed up files. Margaret stood near the door, watching from a distance. Lucas stopped at the foot of the bench. "You don't owe me anything," he said, "but I need to ask, why didn't you say something? You knew me." Miranda swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. "Because I couldn't. If I had, it might have compromised the case and my role in it." Lucas's jaw tensed, but his eyes softened just enough. "Fair," he said. "That's always the word, fair. But the truth is, the world's never been fair. Not for people like me." She lowered her gaze, her fingers brushing the edge of the wood in front of her. "You're right," she said. "I wish I'd done more. Back then, even now." He was quiet for a moment, then he sighed, the tension easing just slightly.
"We were kids. We didn't know what the world would ask of us." She met his eyes. "But I do now." Lucas gave a small nod. "Good." Then he turned and walked away, his back straight as he exited through the heavy courthouse doors. Miranda remained alone. The courtroom echoed with the absence of voices, filled now only by the weight of unspoken truths. She had upheld the law, but she had seen its limits, its blind spots. The verdict was just, but justice? Justice was a moving target, one that demanded more than rulings and procedure. It demanded courage. As the sun dipped low over the Portland skyline, casting gold across the courthouse steps, Miranda stepped outside. The air was crisp, the evening quiet. She made herself a promise. She couldn't change the past, but she could do more now. She had a voice, a seat at the table, and a chance to shape more than rulings. She could shape reform. It wouldn't be easy. It might not even be possible. But for Lucas, and for herself, she would try. The story of Judge Miranda Carlisle and Lucas Vance reveals powerful truths about justice, conscience, and the weight of silence. One of the most important lessons is that neutrality, when facing injustice, is never truly neutral. It can quietly reinforce the very systems that cause harm. Miranda upheld the law, but the trial showed her that legality and justice aren't always the same. In life, many of us are placed in roles where speaking out feels risky, where doing what's right on paper can mean ignoring what's right in our hearts. This story reminds us that our past choices, silences, and comforts can shape the lives of others in unseen ways. But it also offers hope.
it's never too late to recognize those failings and decide to act differently. True justice requires more than rules. It requires humanity, courage, and empathy. Whether we're judges, neighbors, or strangers, we all hold the power to see people for more than assumptions. And that simple shift in how we listen and lead can ripple outward, changing systems, restoring dignity, and healing wounds we didn't know we had a hand in causing. If you found this video helpful or thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really helps more people discover our content. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates from our channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next videos.